strip her." The command cut through the throne room like a blade, and Seraphine felt her blood turn to ice. Around her, the gathered nobles of the Shadowcrest pack fell silent, their whispers dying like candles snuffed out one by one. Elder Margarav stepped forward, his silver ceremonial robes sweeping the marble floor. His face was carved from stone, showing no mercy, no hesitation. "The council has spoken. We must see the evidence of her crimes with our own eyes." Seraphine's hands trembled as she clutched the rough fabric of her servant's tunic. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but the guards flanking her were mountains of muscle and malice. Behind them, row upon row of pack nobility watched with hungry eyes, waiting for her humiliation like vultures circling dying prey. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Please don't make me. Did you show mercy to the Alpha King's heir when you cursed him?" Margaret's voice boomed across the chamber. "Did you think of modesty when you cast your wicked spells upon Prince Kaith?" "I didn't curse anyone." Seraphine's voice broke. "Lies." Lady Vixara rose from her seat among the noble assembly, her crimson gown billowing like fresh blood. We all saw the boy collapse. We all saw the dark magic consuming him. And we all know this half-breed Omega was the last person in his chambers. The crowd erupted. Voices crashed over Seraphine like waves against rocks. Accusations, demands for justice, calls for her execution. She wanted to disappear, to sink into the floor and never be seen again. All her life she'd been invisible, the orphaned daughter of a wolf and a human, too weak to shift, too broken to belong. She'd survived by being small, quiet, useful, by staying out of everyone's way. And then she'd made the mistake of caring. She'd made the mistake of loving a boy who would one day be king. "Enough stalling," Margarav said, and nodded to the guards. "Reveal what she hides." The guards moved with practiced efficiency. One grabbed her arms, wrenching them behind her back, while the other reached for the hem of her tunic. Seraphine struggled, but it was like fighting against iron chains. Tears burned her eyes as she felt the fabric begin to rise. "Stop this at once." The voice that thundered through the throne room carried the weight of ancient power. Every wolf in the chamber felt it in their bones, the presence of their Alpha King. Thaddeus Shadowcrest stood at the entrance, his massive frame filling the doorway, his eyes blazing with barely contained fury. The guards released Seraphine immediately, stepping back, as if burned. She fell to her knees, clutching her tunic, her whole body shaking. "My king," Margarav bowed deeply, though his tone held an edge of defiance. "We were merely following protocol. This Omega stands accused of cursing Prince Kaith. The evidence must be examined." Thaddeus strode forward, each footfall echoing like a judge's gavel. His presence was overwhelming. 7 feet of raw power wrapped in muscle and authority. His dark hair streaked with silver at the temples. His face scarred from 100 battles. At 53, he was in his prime, the strongest alpha in 3 territories, and he was furious. He would shame a member of my household in front of the entire court. His voice was deadly quiet now, which somehow made it more terrifying. "You would strip a woman bare for your entertainment." "Not entertainment, my king. Justice." Margrave held his ground, foolish or brave. It was hard to say which. "Your son lies in his chambers, plagued by curses that even our strongest healers cannot break. Someone must answer for this crime." Thaddeus's jaw clenched. For a moment, Seraphine thought he might tear Margarav apart where he stood. Instead, He turned his gaze to her, and she nearly broke under the weight of it. Those ice-blue eyes saw everything, missed nothing. "Stand up, girl." Seraphine forced herself to her feet, though her legs felt like water. She couldn't meet his eyes. She'd served in his household for 5 years, invisible among the dozens of servants who kept the castle running. He'd never noticed her before. Why would he? She was nobody. "Did you curse my son?" "No, my king." Her voice was steady, even though she was dying inside. "I would never harm Prince Keith. Never." "Then you won't mind showing us your back?" The words hit her like a physical blow. Seraphine's eyes flew to his face, searching for any sign of mercy, but found only implacable determination. Of course he needed to be certain. He needed proof, and her back was covered in proof. Just not the kind anyone expected. "My king," she swallowed hard. "There are things on my back, but they're not what you think. They're not." "Then show me." It wasn't a request. Seraphine closed her eyes, drew a deep breath, and with trembling fingers, she pulled her tunic over her head. The gasps that rippled through the throne room were instantaneous. But they weren't gasps of confirmation or vindication. They were gasps of horror. Seraphine's back was a tapestry of scars, each one raised in dark, carved into her pale skin like twisted calligraphy. But these weren't ordinary scars. They moved. They writhed. Each one pulsed with a sickly purple light. And if you look closely, if you were brave enough to look closely, you could see symbols shifting within them. Ancient runes that had no business being on living flesh. "Merciful moon," someone whispered. That moved closer, and Seraphine flinched despite herself. She felt his presence behind her, felt the heat of him, the barely leashed power. When he spoke, his voice was strained. "How many?" 17, my king." Her voice was hollow. 17 curses, each one meant to kill. "Impossible," Lady Vixara breathed. "No one could survive 17 death curses. The first one alone would kill an ordinary wolf." "Yes." Seraphine turned, clutching her tunic to her chest, and for the first time since entering the throne room, she lifted her chin. Let them see her face. Let them see what their precious prince had cost her. But I'm not an ordinary wolf. I'm not a wolf at all. Not really. I'm half human, and apparently that makes me just weak enough to survive what would kill anyone else. That stared at her, and she watched the pieces click together in his mind. The intelligence behind those ice-blue eyes was sharp as any blade. "My son. Someone has been trying to kill my son." "Yes." Seraphine's voice cracked. "For the past 8 months, someone has been placing death curses on objects in Prince Keith's chambers. His sword, his favorite chair, the clasp on his cloak, his dinner plates. I found them before he could touch them, and she pressed a hand to her mouth, fighting back sobs. I took them. I took them all because I couldn't let him die. I couldn't." Her legs gave out. She would have fallen, but Thaddeus caught her, his hands impossibly gentle for someone so powerful. He lowered her carefully to the floor and then did something that shocked everyone in the throne room into absolute silence. He removed his own royal cloak and draped it over her shoulders, covering her scarred back from their prying eyes. "Margarav," Thaddeus said quietly, "you will personally oversee the investigation into who has been attempting to murder my son. You will find them. You will bring them to me. And if I discover you had any part in this farce of a trial, any part at all, I will hang your entrails from the castle walls." Margarav's face went white. "My king, I assure you, Get out of my sight, all of you, except her." Thaddeus's arms swept across the assembly. "This court is dismissed." The nobles fled like rats from a sinking ship. Within minutes, the throne room was empty except for Seraphina, the king, and his personal guard standing discreetly at the far exits. Thaddeus knelt beside her, and Seraphine finally allowed herself to look at him. Really look at him. Up close, his face was even more striking. Hard planes and sharp angles, softened only by the silver threading through his beard. But his eyes, those ice blue eyes that had terrified her moments ago, now held something she'd never seen directed at her before. "Wonder why?" he asked simply. "Why would you do this? Why would you take curses meant for my son onto your own flesh?" Seraphine laughed, but it came out bitter. "Because I'm a fool, my king. Because I fell in love with him when I was 16 and he didn't even know I existed. Because I've watched him train in the courtyards and study in the libraries and grow into someone worthy of being king." And tears spilled down her cheeks. "I couldn't let him die, even if it killed me instead, even if he never knew, even if I'm nothing to him. I couldn't." That silenced her by pressing his thumb gently over her lips. "You are not nothing. Do you understand me? Anyone who would sacrifice themselves 17 times for another person is not nothing." "But I failed." Seraphine's voice broke completely. "He still cursed. I couldn't stop the last one. It was too strong, too fast. I tried to take it, but it split, and which is why he's sick but alive." Thaddeus's thumb traced her cheekbone, wiping away tears. "If you hadn't intercepted part of that curse, my son would be dead right now. Do you understand? You saved him. You've been saving him for months, and no one knew. No one thanked you. Instead, they tried to strip you bare and shame you in front of the entire court. I'm just a servant, my king, a half-breed Omega. This is what I meant for. Stop." The command was gentle but absolute. "You're more wolf than anyone in that throne room, human blood or not. You have more honor in your smallest finger than most of my nobles have in their entire bodies." Seraphine didn't know what to say, didn't know how to process the way he was looking at her, the way his hand lingered on her face, the way his scent, pine and smoke and something wild, was wrapping around her like a blanket. "The curses," Thaddeus said, his tone shifting to something more clinical, more controlled. "Can they be removed? I don't know. Maybe. But they're bound to me now. If they're ripped away too quickly, it could kill me. They've become part of my skin, part of my—" She gestured helplessly. "Part of me. Then we'll be careful. We'll find the best healers in every territory. Will." "No." Seraphine pulled back and immediately regretted the loss of his touch. "No, my king. I'm nobody. You can't waste resources on someone like me. You need to focus on finding who's trying to kill your son. I need to protect what's mine." The words came out as a growl, and Seraphine's breath caught. "And whether you realize it or not, girl, you're mine now." "I don't understand." Thaddeus stood, pulling her up with him, keeping his cloak wrapped around her shoulders. "You sacrificed yourself for my bloodline, for my son. In the old ways, that creates a bond, a debt that can never be repaid. But more than that." He paused, and something flickered across his face. Uncertainty. It looked strange on him. "More than that, you did it for love. Pure, selfless love. Do you have any idea how rare that is? Especially in a place like this where everyone wants something. Where every kindness has a price." Seraphine shook her head mutely. "I had a mate once," Thaddeus continued, his voice growing softer. Kaith's mother. She died bringing him into this world 23 years ago. Since then, I've had my duty, my pack, my kingdom. But I never expected. He cupped her face with both hands now, forcing her to hold his gaze. I never expected to feel the bond call to me again. Not at my age, not after so many years. But standing here looking at you, seeing what you've done, what you've endured, I feel it, that pull, that recognition, as if the moon herself is saying, this one is yours to protect. You don't mean Seraphine's heart was hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. You can't mean I'm saying that fate has a sense of humor. Little wolf, you love my son, but the moon has other plans. Before Seraphine could respond, before she could process the impossibility of what he was suggesting, the throne room doors burst open. A young man stumbled in, supported by 2 guards, his face pale and drawn with pain. "Father," Caleb gasped. "Father, I need to tell you, Seraphine, she's innocent. She's been protecting me. I figured it out. The curses, they were in my chambers. But she..." He stopped, his eyes finally focusing on the scene before him. His father holding a half-dressed servant girl, his father's cloak around her shoulders. The intimacy of it, understanding crashed over his handsome features like a wave. "Caleb," Thaddeus said carefully, "you should be resting. I heard what they were doing to her." Caleb pushed away from the guards, swaying slightly. Up close, Seraphine could see the curse marks on his skin, faint purple veins spreading from his chest like poisoned roots. I heard they were putting her on trial, and I couldn't. I had to come, had to tell them the truth. He took a step towards Seraphine, and she saw it in his eyes. The recognition, the guilt, the sudden dawning awareness that she existed at all. "You're the maid who always leaves extra firewood in my room," he said slowly. "The one who fixes my torn tunics. The one who makes sure my tea is exactly the right temperature. Yes, my prince, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell anyone what you were doing?" Seraphine smiled sadly. "Would you have believed a half-breed Omega, my prince? Would anyone?" Caleb flinched. "I want to say yes. I want to believe I'm better than that. But honestly," he ran a hand through his dark hair, "I probably wouldn't have. I'm ashamed to admit it, but I probably would have dismissed you just like everyone else." "You're young," Thaddeus said, and there was pride in his voice despite the circumstances. "You're learning. The fact that you came here, that you spoke up for her, that shows growth." Caleb nodded, but his eyes were still on Seraphine. "Thank you for saving my life multiple times, apparently. I owe you a debt I can never repay." "You owe me nothing, my prince. I disagree, which is why I want you to know that you're under my protection now. Anyone who tries to hurt you will answer to me." He straightened, trying to look regal despite his obvious weakness. "And I'll help Father find whoever did this. They'll pay for what they did to you. We'll find them. Then he is corrected. But first, you need to heal both of you." Over the next several days, the castle transformed from a place of suspicion and cruelty into something resembling a fortress. Thaddeus stationed guards at every entrance, questioned every noble who'd had access to Kaith's chambers, and brought in healers from 3 territories to examine Seraphine's cursed scars. The healers were unanimous in their verdict. The curses were too deeply embedded to remove safely. Not yet. Seraphine would need time, rest, and careful treatment. Each scar would have to be addressed individually. slowly coaxed out of her flesh like splinters from 2 deep wounds. It could take years. The head healer, an ancient wolf named Morai, told Thaddeus, and even then, she'll likely bear some scars forever. The magic has changed her on a fundamental level. Then we have years, Thaddeus replied simply. Whatever she needs. He moved Seraphine from the servants' quarters to a room in the royal wing directly across from his own chambers. The other servants whispered, "Of course," speculated, but none dared question the Alpha King's decisions. Seraphine found herself in a strange new world. She had fine dresses now, though she rarely wore them, preferring simple tunics that didn't irritate her sensitive back. She had servants of her own, which felt surreal and wrong. She had guards who bowed to her, nobles who suddenly remembered her name. But most of all, she had Thaddeus. He visited her every evening, sitting beside her bed while healers worked on her scars, holding her hand through the pain. They talked about everything and nothing. His years as Alpha, her childhood as an orphan, the books they'd both read, the places they wanted to see. "I always wanted to visit the Northern Lights," Seraphine admitted one night, her voice dreamy with pain medication. "My mother used to tell me stories about them before she died. She said they were the spirits of wolves dancing in the sky." "Then we'll go," Thaddeus said. "When you're healed, I'll take you north and we'll watch the lights together." "You don't have to make promises you can't keep, my king." "I never do." Caleb visited too, though less frequently. Each time he came, Seraphine saw the guilt eating at him. He brought her books from the library, flowers from the garden, anything he thought might ease her pain or boredom. "I should have seen you," he said one afternoon, his voice heavy with regret. "All those years you were right there and I was so blind, so focused on myself." "You were being a prince," Seraphine interrupted gently. "You had responsibilities. You still do. That's no excuse for being oblivious to someone's suffering. Maybe not, but you're seeing now. That's what matters." He took her hand, squeezed it. "I'm glad my father found you. I'm glad you're going to be part of our family." Seraphine's heart stuttered. "Caleb, I don't know what you think is happening, but your father and I were not, aren't you?" He smiled, and it was knowing, mature beyond his years. "I see how he looks at you, how you look at him. And I think," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "I think maybe fate knew what it was doing. You loved me, but not the way you love him. What you felt for me was a young girl's infatuation. What you feel for him is something deeper, truer." Seraphine wanted to deny it, but she couldn't because he was right. Somewhere between those evening conversations and Thaddeus's gentle hands on her scars and the way he looked at her, like she was precious, her heart had shifted. The boy she'd loved from afar had become a dear friend, but the man who wrapped her in his cloak and called her his, he'd become everything. The breakthrough in the investigation came 3 weeks after that terrible day in the throne room. Margarav himself burst into Thaddeus's study where the king was reviewing reports with Seraphine at his side. "My king, we found her, Lady Vixara." She confessed to everything. That was on his feet, instantly. "Bring her to the throne room now." 20 minutes later, Lady Vixara knelt before the court, her crimson gown torn and dirty, her face streaked with tears. But there was defiance in her eyes, still pride and hatred burning bright. "Why?" Thaddeus demanded. "Why try to murder my son? Because he's weak." Vixar spat. "Because you're weak. Because both of you care more about honor and kindness than power. This pack needs strength, not sentiment. My son should be your heir, not that soft-hearted boy. Enough. Thaddeus's voice was deadly quiet. You murdered 3 servants in your experiments. You nearly killed my son. You tried to destroy an innocent girl who done nothing but save the prince's life. And you did it all for ambition, for power, for the future of this pack. You have no vision of the future. You only understand the past. Blood and cruelty and might makes right. That age is ending, Vexara, and you're ending with it. The execution was carried out at dawn. Seraphine didn't watch. She couldn't. Despite everything Vizara had done, despite the pain she'd caused, Seraphine felt only sadness at the waste of it all. She was standing on the castle balcony when Thaddeus found her, the early morning light turning the sky shades of pink and gold. It's done, he said quietly, coming to stand beside her. I know. They were silent for a long moment, watching the sun rise over the mountains. Finally, Thaddeus spoke. The healers say you're responding well to treatment. 6 of the curses have been successfully removed. Mirai thinks the rest will follow. Yes, I'm feeling stronger every day. Good, because I need to ask you something and I need you to be strong enough to answer honestly. Seraphine turned to face him, her heart beginning to race. My king, Thaddeus, he corrected gently. Just Thaddeus. No titles, not for this. Thaddeus, she repeated, the name foreign but sweet on her tongue. He took her hands, his thumbs tracing circles on her palms. These past weeks, getting to know you, seeing your strength, your kindness, your courage. You've become essential to me, Seraphine. When I wake up, my first thought is whether you slept well. When I'm in meetings, I find myself wondering what you'd think of whatever policy we're discussing. When I see something beautiful, I want to share it with you. Seraphine's breath caught. Thaddeus, I'm an old wolf, he continued, a wry smile touching his lips. Set in my ways, scarred and battle-worn and far too serious. I have a son nearly your age. I have responsibilities that would crush most people. I'm not easy to live with, and I'm certainly not the romantic hero from your stories. But he lifted one hand to her face, cupping her cheek with infinite tenderness. But I'm yours if you'll have me. My heart, my protection, my pack, my kingdom, all of it. I know you thought you loved Kaith, and I know this is sudden, and I know you have every right to say no. But I needed you to know the bond I feel when I look at you. It's not duty or gratitude. It's fate. It's choice. It's love. Seraphine felt tears spilling down her cheeks, but for the first time in weeks, they were tears of joy. You really don't know, do you? Know what? That you are the hero from my stories. That every time you held my hand through the pain, every time you visited me, even though you had a kingdom to run, every time you looked at me like I mattered, you were proving that romance isn't about grand gestures or perfect words. It's about showing up. It's about caring when no one's watching. It's about seeing someone's scars and calling them beautiful. Anyway, she stepped closer, rising on her toes, her hands finding his chest. I thought I loved Caleb, but I loved an idea, fantasy. I didn't know him. Not really. But you, she smiled through her tears. You, I know, your favorite tea is honeyed chamomile, even though you'd never admit it in front of the court. You hate council meetings, but never miss one, because you take your duties seriously. You check on every member of your pack personally when they're sick, even the servants. You're patient and fierce and honorable. And yes, You're serious and scarred and set in your ways. And I love every single thing about you. That made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. Is that a yes? That's a yes. He kissed her then, soft and careful, like she was something precious that might break. But Seraphine was done being careful, done being small. She'd survived 17 death curses. She'd faced down a court full of nobles who wanted her destroyed. She'd earned the right to kiss the man she loved without holding back. So she kissed him deeply, fiercely, pouring every ounce of her love into it. Felt his surprise, his hesitation melting into something hotter, wilder. His arms came around her, careful of her still healing back, and she felt safe in a way she'd never felt before. Protected, cherished, home. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Thaddeus rested his forehead against hers. The pack is going to talk. Let them. The nobles will have opinions. They always do. This won't be easy. Being my mate, my queen, it's a target on your back. People will challenge you, test you, try to find weakness. Seraphine laughed, the sound bright and free. Thatas, I have 17 cursed scars on my back. Each one was meant to kill the prince of this kingdom. Each one I took, willingly. If anyone thinks I'm weak or afraid, they're welcome to test that theory. Pride blazed in his eyes. There's my fierce little wolf. Not so little anymore, she teased. I'm the future queen. I should probably start acting like it. You've been acting like it since the moment you took the first curse. You just didn't know it yet. They stood there on the balcony, wrapped in each other's arms, watching the sun rise higher over the kingdom they would rule together. Behind them, Seraphine heard footsteps approaching, Caleb probably coming to join them for breakfast, as had become his habit. Mother would have loved you, Caleb said quietly, confirming her guess. He came to stand beside them, looking out over the same view. She always said that true strength came from sacrifice, from choosing others over yourself. You embody that. I'm not trying to replace her, Seraphine said quickly. I would never, I know, but you'll honor her just by being you. He turned to face them both, and there was peace in his expression now. The guilt had faded, replaced by genuine happiness. Besides, I always wanted a mother who was younger than me. Really keeps me humble. Seraphine laughed and swatted his arm. Brat. Future queen. Both of you stop, Thaddeus interjected, but he was smiling. Seraphine, there's one more thing we need to discuss. What's that? The mating ceremony. Traditionally, it's a full moon ritual, which means we'd wait 3 weeks. But he hesitated, and she saw vulnerability in his eyes. I don't want to wait. I've already waited a lifetime for you without knowing it. Unless you need time. Unless you want tomorrow, Seraphine interrupted. Let's do it tomorrow. The pack won't have time to prepare properly. The nobles will complain about the rush. Good. Let them complain. I'm done waiting too. Done being invisible. Done pretending I'm something small and insignificant. She took both his hands and hers. I want to stand before your pack as your mate. I want them to see that even a half-breed Omega can earn her place through courage and love. And I want to start our life together now, not 3 weeks from now. That has pulled her close, kissing her forehead. Tomorrow it is. The mating ceremony was smaller than tradition dictated, but no less powerful. They held it in the courtyard at sunset, with the whole pack in attendance, servants and nobles alike, because Seraphine insisted. If she was going to be queen, she wanted every member of the pack to witness it, to know that she belonged to all of them, not just the privileged few. She wore a simple white dress, her cursed scars visible through the sheer fabric of the back. She'd refused to hide them. They were part of her story now, part of her strength. Thaddeus wore traditional ceremonial armor, but he'd removed his crown. "I'm not a king today," he'd told her while dressing. "I'm just a wolf claiming his mate." The ceremony itself was ancient and beautiful. They cut their palms and pressed them together, letting their blood mingle while swearing oaths under the rising moon. Seraphine felt the bond snap into place like a physical thing, a golden thread connecting her heart to his. Stronger than any curse, brighter than any magic. When Thaddeus kissed her, the whole pack howled their approval. Afterward, during the feast, Seraphine found herself surrounded by well-wishers. Servants who'd once ignored her now bowed deeply. Nobles who'd wanted her executed now offered cautious congratulations. It was surreal and overwhelming and perfect. But the best moment came when an elderly wolf, a woman who'd served the pack for 60 years, approached her with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," the woman whispered, "for showing us that anyone can be worthy, and that sacrifice and love matter more than blood or rank. My granddaughter is half human like you, watching you stand beside the king today. You gave her hope. You gave all of us hope." Seraphine hugged the woman tightly, her own tears flowing freely. This was why it all mattered. Not the crown or the title or the power, but the chance to change things, to make the world a little kinder, a little more just. That night, alone in the royal chambers that were now hers by right, Seraphine stood before a mirror and looked at her reflection. The cursed scars were still there, still would be for months or years to come. But they no longer looked like marks of shame. They looked like badges of honor. That came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, careful as always of her sensitive back. Regrets? Not even one. She leaned into his warmth. "Though I do have a question. Anything? That story you told me about the northern lights, about taking me there. Were you serious?" "Completely." "Why?" Seraphine smiled at their reflection, the grizzled Alpha King and the scarred half-breed Omega who'd somehow found their way to each other. "'Cause I'd like to go soon. Just us. Before the responsibilities and the politics and the weight of the crown become too heavy to set down. Then we'll go next week if you want." "Next week sounds perfect." They stood there in comfortable silence, watching the moon rise through the window, both of them thinking about the impossible path that had led them here. Seraphine had come to the castle as nobody, an invisible servant with nothing to offer but her labor. She'd survived curses meant to kill gods. She'd faced humiliation and trial and pain beyond imagining, and she'd emerged as queen. But more than that, she'd emerged as herself, strong, whole, loved. The scars on her back told a story. Each one was a curse she'd taken. Yes, but each one was also a choice. A moment where she decided that love mattered more than safety, that courage mattered more than comfort, that some things were worth bleeding for. And as Thaddeus kissed her shoulder, gentle as always with her healing skin, Seraphine knew with absolute certainty that she'd make the same choices again, every time. Because in the end, the greatest curse wasn't the magic carved into her flesh. It was never being seen, never being valued, never being loved. And that curse, that one was broken forever. The peace lasted exactly 11 days. Seraphine woke to screaming. Not the normal sounds of the castle, servants preparing breakfast, guards changing shifts. the distant clang of the blacksmith's hammer. This was different. This was terror. She bolted upright, ignoring the sharp pull of her healing scars. Beside her, Thaddeus was already moving, pulling on clothes with the practiced speed of a warrior who'd woken to emergencies 1,000 times before. "Stay here," he commanded, but Seraphine was already reaching for her dress. Not a chance. They burst into the corridor together to find chaos. Servants were running, screaming about fire and demons and the end of days. Guards rushed past, their faces pale with fear. And beneath it all, Seraphine felt something that made her blood run cold. Magic. Dark magic. The same sickly twisted energy she'd felt in every curse that had been carved into her back. The throne room. A guard panted as he ran past. "They're in the throne room." Thaddeus shifted into his wolf form mid-stride, a massive silver beast that was more legend than animal. Seraphine ran after him, her human legs no match for his supernatural speed. But she pushed herself harder than she ever had before, because she knew with a certainty that came from deep in her scarred back that whoever was in that throne room had come for her. The throne room doors had been blown off their hinges. Inside, purple fire danced along the walls, not burning, but spreading like infection. And in the center of it all stood 3 figures in hooded robes, their faces hidden, their hands crackling with that same dark energy that had nearly killed Caleb. One of them held the prince by the throat, lifting him off the ground as if he weighed nothing. "Stop!" Seraphine's voice rang out before she could think better of it. "Let him go." The hooded figures turned as one. The one holding Kaith laughed, and the sound was wrong, layered like multiple voices speaking at once. The little Omega who thinks she's a queen. How precious. The figure tossed Kaith aside like a broken toy. The prince hit the wall with a sickening crack and didn't move. "We've come for you, half-breed. Did you really think you could steal our curses and live?" Thaddeus lunged, but the figures moved in perfect synchronization. Walls of dark energy slammed up, separating him from Seraphine, trapping her in a circle with the 3 mysterious attackers. She could hear him howling, hear his claws scraping against the barrier, but the magic held. "You see," the center figure continued, circling Seraphine like a predator. "Those curses were meant to kill. Each one was carefully crafted, imbued with our life force, our power. When you took them into yourself, when your weak half-human blood somehow allowed you to survive, you didn't just steal the curses. You stole pieces of us." "I don't understand," Seraphine said, though she was buying time more than seeking answers. Her mind was racing. The throne room had weapons on the walls, but she'd never make it to them. She had no wolf form to shift into, no natural magic to fight back with. All she had was her wits and her will to survive. "Of course you don't. You're just a servant playing dress-up." The figure pulled back their hood, revealing a woman's face twisted with hatred and something else. Fear. But your body knows. Your scars know. They're calling to us, begging us to reclaim what's ours. And when we do, when we rip those curses back out of your flesh, you'll finally serve a useful purpose. You'll die, and we'll have our power back amplified by however your pathetic body managed to contain it. Behind the barrier, Thaddeus was going mad, slamming his massive body against the magic wall over and over. The other 2 figures raised their hands, and Seraphine felt her cursed scars begin to burn. Not the dull ache she'd grown accustomed to, but searing white, hot agony that drove her to her knees. "That's it," the woman crooned. "Feel them awakening. Feel them remembering their true masters." Seraphine screamed as the pain intensified. She could feel the curses moving under her skin, writhing like living things, trying to tear their way out of her. Blood began to seep through her dress, dark purple instead of red, staining the white fabric. Through the haze of agony, she heard Keith groaning, struggling to his feet. Saw Thaddeus's desperate eyes as he threw himself against the barrier again and again. Felt the cursed scars on her back splitting open, beginning to peel away from her flesh. And something inside her snapped. She'd survived these curses once. She'd carried them for months, let them become part of her, integrated their poison into her very cells. They weren't foreign anymore. They weren't the enemy. They were hers. "No," Seraphine gasped out. "You're wrong." "What?" The woman leaned closer, clearly amused. "What was that, little Omega?" Seraphine lifted her head, met those cruel eyes, and smiled through the blood on her lips. "I said you're wrong. These curses don't belong to you anymore. They belong to me. I claim them. I survived them. I made them part of my story, and you can't have them back." "Foolish girl, you have no power here." But Seraphine wasn't listening. She was focusing inward on the 17 curse marks burned into her back, on the way they pulsed and writhed on the dark magic trying to rip itself free. Instead of fighting it, instead of trying to hold on, she did something the curse casters would never expect. She let go not of the curses themselves, but of the fear, the shame, the belief that she was weak, that she was less than, that she was nothing. All the invisible chains that had bound her since childhood, all the lies she'd believed about herself, she released them all at once. And the curses, those twisted, hateful spells that had been meant to kill, suddenly had nowhere to anchor themselves because they'd been designed to feed on weakness, on fear, on self-loathing. They'd been crafted to exploit those emotions, to use them as fuel. But Seraphine had none of those things left. What she had was love. Thaddeus's love, fierce and protective, hammering against that barrier even though it was clearly hurting him. Keith's love, the prince, dragging himself across the floor even though he could barely move trying to reach her. The pack's love, dozens of wolves who'd gathered outside the throne room, their howls of support vibrating through the very stones of the castle. And most importantly, her own love for herself. For the girl who'd survived when she shouldn't have. For the woman who'd sacrificed everything for someone who didn't even know her name. For the queen who was learning that true strength came not from never falling, but from choosing to rise every single time. The cursed marks on her back began to glow, but not with the sickly purple of dark magic. This light was silver, bright as moonlight, pure as starfire. The pain shifted, transformed into something else entirely. Not comfort, but rightness. Like puzzle pieces finally clicking into place. "What are you doing?" the woman shrieked. "Stop! You're destroying them." "I'm not destroying them," Seraphine said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "I'm changing them, redeeming them, making them mine." The 3 curse casters screamed in unison, their bodies beginning to smoke and crack. Without the tether to their curses, without that dark connection, their stolen life force had nowhere to go. They'd poured too much of themselves into those spells, betting everything that they'd be able to reclaim them, amplified and strengthened. They'd never considered that someone might take their hatred and transform it into something else entirely. The barriers around Thaddeus dissolved. He shifted back to human form in an instant, rushing to Seraphine and catching her as she collapsed. Behind him, healers were already swarming Kaith, checking his injuries. "I've got you," Thaddeus whispered fiercely. "I've got you." Seraphine looked past him to where the 3 curse casters lay on the marble floor, their bodies dissolving into ash. She should have felt triumph, victory. Instead, she felt only sadness. They were so consumed by their own darkness, she murmured, so convinced that power came from hurting others. They never understood that real strength is about lifting people up, not tearing them down. "That's why you won," Thaddeus said, cradling her close. "That's why you'll always win." The healers descended on Seraphine next, but their examination brought shocked gasps. The curse marks on her back were still there, still visible, but they'd changed completely. Instead of the twisted, dark scars that had pulsed with malevolent energy, they now looked like silver tattoos, beautiful and intricate, each one depicting a different scene. A girl taking a burden from a boy's shoulders, a servant standing tall before a hostile court, a half-breed Omega wearing a crown. Each curse had become a story, a testament, a reminder of what she'd overcome. "Remarkable," Morai breathed. "I've never seen anything like this. The curse magic has been completely transformed. It's still powerful, still present. But now he struggled for words. It's protective, defensive, like armor made of moonlight." Caleb limped over, one arm in a sling, courtesy of the healers. His face was bruised, but his eyes were clear. "You saved us again." "We saved each other," Seraphine corrected gently. "You distracted them long enough for me to figure out what to do. Your father gave me something to fight for. The pack gave me strength to draw on. None of us did this alone." Still, Caleb insisted, "You're the one who transformed curses into blessings. That takes something special." He glanced at his father. "She's definitely powerful enough to be queen. Anyone who argues otherwise can take it up with me." Over the following weeks, the castle slowly returned to normal. The damage to the throne room was repaired. The purple fire stains were scrubbed from the walls. Caleb healed, though he'd carry a scar on his ribs for the rest of his life. A reminder, he said, of the day he learned that true nobility had nothing to do with birth and everything to do with choices. But the biggest change was in how people looked at Seraphine. The nobles who'd been polite but distant now bowed deeply when she passed. The servants who'd once ignored her now sought her counsel. Word had spread throughout the kingdom about what she'd done, how she'd taken death curses meant for the prince and survived, how she'd transformed dark magic into light, how she'd defeated 3 powerful curse casters with nothing but her own inner strength. Ballads were being written about her, songs sung in taverns across the territory. The scarred queen, they called her, the Omega who rose, the half-breed who became whole. Seraphine tried not to let it go to her head. "You know what's funny?" she said to Thaddeus one evening as they walked through the castle gardens. The Northern Lights trip had been postponed after the attack, but they'd rescheduled for the following month. A year ago, I would have done anything to be noticed, to matter, to be seen. And now that everyone's watching, I kind of miss being invisible. That laughed, the sound rich and warm. "Welcome to royalty," The burden of the crown isn't really the responsibility, it's the constant scrutiny. Everyone watching, everyone judging, everyone having opinions about your every move. How do you stand it? By remembering what matters. Not their opinions, but the people I'm trying to protect. He stopped walking, turned to face her, his hands gentle on her shoulders. And by having someone at my side who understands, who's been invisible and noticed, weak and powerful, nobody and queen, someone who's walked in everyone's shoes and knows that titles don't define worth. Seraphine smiled up at him. That's a very poetic way of saying you're glad you don't have to deal with all the political nonsense alone anymore. That too. He kissed her forehead, then her nose, then her lips. Soft and sweet and perfect. But mostly I'm just grateful the moon brought you to me. Even if it took 17 death curses and a homicidal noble woman to make it happen. Fate has a twisted sense of humor. Fate has perfect timing. We just don't always recognize it in the moment. They continued their walk hand in hand while the moon rose full and bright overhead. In the distance, Seraphine could hear the pack, her pack now settling in for the night. Pups playing, adults sharing stories, elders passing down wisdom to the next generation. She was part of something now, part of a family, a community, a legacy that would outlast her own life. The scars on her back were proof that she'd earned her place through sacrifice and courage. The crown on her head was proof that even the invisible could rise. But more than any of that, the love in her heart for Thaddeus, for Kaith, for the pack, for herself, was proof that sometimes the greatest magic wasn't power or spells or ancient rituals. Sometimes the greatest magic was simply choosing to believe you were worthy of love, even when everyone told you otherwise.
The end. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed listening to this story, please hit the like button, share it with someone who would love it, and subscribe to Nightbond Narratives. And don't forget to ring the bell so you never miss what's coming next. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Tell me which part of the world you're watching from, and which part of the story you like the most. Creating a full-length audiobook video takes a lot of time and effort, so if you notice any small ambiguities, please be kind and forgive them. Your support truly means the world and motivates me to keep bringing you more stories. Thank you for listening all the way through. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, hitting that like button really helps the channel grow. And now I want to hear from you. What was your favorite moment of justice or drama in the story? Until next time, stay warm and keep enjoying the tales of Nightbond Narratives.